We hope you all enjoyed our stellar film premiere. We are very excited to celebrate what Stellar is and does and has accomplished with great colleagues, not just here on our own campus, but in the state, in the nation, and around the world. The very first thing that has to be said is a great thank you to Julio Mata and to Rogelio Almeida for technical assistance in putting all of this together. We thank them for helping us bring this to you. Certainly, as the thanks are going out, the very key group to be thanked are Stellar staff. And those of you who know Stellar and who know the work that is done with Stellar know the names of Camille Farrell and Mark Walvard and Brenton Wimmer, but what you don't know is all of the work, the hard work that they do in service to having Stellar go here on our own campus, and indeed in having Stellar go at other places around the country and around the world at other universities and colleges that have adopted and are adopting Stellar. And that leads me to one special VIP thank you, this being the international premiere that it is in one regard, although we will hold later in the semester a national/international premiere where we will extend special invitations to colleagues from around the country and around the world. But on this this presentation, we have with us the campus principal from Technological University Dublin, Diarmuid O'Callaghan, and we recognize you and thank you very much for joining us. So what we will proceed to now is a brief panel. One housekeeping note, let me point out the Q&A function, which you will see at the bottom of your screen. That's a way to type in questions that you might want to ask our panelists. The time for the panel will be relatively brief, but we do want to gather your questions, and for any that aren't answered, we will follow up in order to make sure you get the answers that you're looking for. And so what I'm going to do at this point is simply first to enumerate the three panelists with us today, and then turn it over to them to introduce themselves and speak for a bit about their role with Stellar, how Stellar has impacted them, and observations that they have had in terms of viewing what Stellar has meant to them as they've seen it on our campus and so forth. And so we're very delighted today to have Dr. Luis Montes, who is our chemistry department chair, but also plays other roles with Stellar. We're delighted to have Talia Rodriguez with us, who is right now a UCO graduate, but that means also that she can bring the student perspective to the panel. And very happy to have Ms. Tamara Steele, who will speak from an employer's perspective. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Dr. Montes, for a few comments.
Yes, so as a faculty member, I've been able to use Stellar in some of our classes. We incorporate it into our capstone experiences where our chemistry majors are able to demonstrate some of their transformation in areas such as health and wellness, certainly discipline knowledge, which is their academic record, but also we look at leadership and global cultural competencies as well. But as a faculty member outside of our classes, we also can have students who are maybe doing research projects with us. They can demonstrate the transformation through RCSA activities, through those outside of class research activities. And then as a mentor in the Hispanic Success Initiative, I've had the opportunity to work with students such as Talia, and you'll hear from her shortly, and just see their transformation through these non-curricular programs. And so as a faculty member, through the training we receive through our fantastic Stellar staff, they support us in our efforts as faculty to kind of help students document their transformation in all kinds of areas, whether it's co-curricular, curricular, inside the classroom, outside of the classroom. And so it's just been a great way for faculty, as a faculty member, to see how our students develop both in and outside of class.
Thank you very much, Dr. Montez. We appreciate those observations. And at this point, I'm happy to have Talia introduce herself and speak, I guess, first from the graduate perspective, since she is a proud graduate now of UCO. And so, Talia, happy to welcome you to the panel.
Let me unmute myself. Okay, I'm happy to be here. I think one of the things, especially like as I move on into my postgraduate journey and applying to law school and stuff, one thing that Stellar has highly impacted me is having this proof in this document that helps with self-affirmation, especially navigating through academia with things like anxiety and imposter syndrome. It's kind of this proof and the reminder that I have done the work and I have the experiences and, you know, the transformation to be able to implement that into like further academic life, especially being able to see things that aren't often incorporated into academia, like culture or health and wellness, mind, body, and soul health and wellness sorts of things. So I think that's one of the most impactful things coming from a graduate side, is that I have this proof, I have this documentation that can help with self-affirmation to be able to navigate through the rest of my postgraduate academic journey.
Thank you very much, Talia, and we will circle back around to you as a student, since you have those years of experience with Stellar here at UCO. But at this point, I'm happy to welcome Tamara Steele for comments from her perspective as an employer. And we've also been so delighted that Tamara has been able to be a part of our Stellar Employer Advisory Board from almost the beginning.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. Like Jeff said, I'm Tamara Steele, and I'm the Director of Human Resources with the Oklahoma Housing Finance Agency. And I began working with Stellar about 4 years ago. As a recruiter for the Oklahoma Department of Human Services, I was tasked with recruitment activities and developing a source of candidates for several of our positions. And UCO was a great source for us to tap into as far as recruiting students for potential vacancies. I participated on several of their on-campus events like career fairs, mock interviews, and then speaking to students in the career services class about opportunities with the state of Oklahoma, and also just talking to just real talk about, what employers look for as far as your resume, interviewing tips, things like that. And so just being on the campus, I was asked to be a part of the advisory board, and I jumped right on board. And like Jeff said, I've been there from, seeing the Stellar snapshot in its infancy in a paper format. Now it's developed into, an online interactive dashboard. So as an employer, I hope that one day every school will be able to develop some type of Stellar-like program, because I think it gives the graduates an opportunity to really articulate their academic and community services. Oftentimes, as an employer, we get that student, recent graduate that's sitting across from us, and they really don't know how to explain or correlate the competencies that they have learned, in the classroom and community events into into what that prospective employer is looking for in an employee. So the Stellar Snapshot just gives that employer a glimpse into that student's career, and they're able to evaluate how they can fit into their organization.
Thank you very much, Tamara. We appreciate those comments. And as I promised Talia, I said I'd circle back in order to get some comments from a student's perspective. And one of the things that I think our audience would be really interested in regarding that perspective, certainly your own perspective as a student, and you shared so magnificently about that, some of that in the film, but also maybe observations about your peers and how you've seen them engage with Stellar and what the talk is, the chatter, if you will, around Stellar that may go on back and forth among students.
Yes, so actually what I will say is my older sister is a readmit student, so she discontinued college for a little while and she came back to UCO, and one of the biggest things that attracted her was actually Stellar. So like she's asked me multiple times, like, I want to get involved in Stellar, how do I? And I'm like, there's a plethora of ways to get involved in Stellar because it's so broad, and I keep telling her to talk to Camille, talk to Mark, talk to all these great resources, because that's one thing that attracted her to come back to school, to see that sort of investment that an institution has put into their students, and they're not just their academic growth, but their character development. And so that's what I would like. I think that's a very impactful thing, you know, someone who is not ever thinking of ever finishing college to come back and want to be involved in something like Stellar. Other things, it's just really, it creates an environment where students from multiple backgrounds, from diverse backgrounds, can see themselves reflected, but also grow in aspects that they might not have the opportunity to in different institutions or in different areas where they don't put this much emphasis on. So, I mean, for me personally, something like global and cultural competency, I saw reflected through the Hispanic Success Initiative, and that's something I could relate to, especially having my background being the daughter of a Mexican immigrant, etc. But it also provides opportunity for me to learn how to be an ally and advocate for other demographics that have, you know, their own different marginalizations and different oppression. And so that's very impactful for me as a person who wants to get into law, especially for civil rights and social justice, that it just really creates an environment, again, where students can grow in ways that I don't think they anticipate to or expect or even necessarily want when they first enter into college, but have no choice but to immerse themselves in something where they have to learn and transform and just grow. So that's what I would say as a student.
Thank you very much. I'll go back to Dr. Montes for a moment after a reminder to everyone, if you want to pose a question to one of our panelists, the Q&A feature down at the bottom is how we'll snag those in order to pass them along. But Luis, I'm interested regarding pre-Stellar, post-Stellar, from a faculty member's perspective, the kinds of differences that you might have noticed when the program was launched.
Pre-Stellar, I mean, as a chemistry faculty member, we're trying to figure out, you know, can they balance chemical reactions? Do they know their chemical instrumentation? And, you know, at the same time, we do try to get them engaged in research, but there's a lot of other things that as faculty members, we kind of hope and dream for our students that we may not always get a chance to kind of push them this direction or kind of have that motivation of, you know, the stellar cores upon graduation, that, you know, how do we get them to go in those directions? But once we have our tenets spelled out, faculty can more clearly explain to students that, okay, yes, you're a chemist, but there's other things you can do as a chemist. You can be a leader as a chemist. You can understand how chemistry plays a role and how global and cultural competencies, having an understanding on those can help you as a chemist as well. certainly how health and wellness plays a role as a chemist. So just being a chemist, it's kind of opened up what it means to be a professional chemist instead of just being able to balance an equation, for example. And so the stellar tenets and the stellar, transformative learning record gives faculty a way to maybe move in different directions that they may not have thought about before, because why would you move in direction if there's not some end goal or product where students can clearly see the progress they've made? And so those reflections that students do to demonstrate that transformation, that really makes it much more real for both the faculty member and the student.
Thank you for those insights. Here is a particular question directed for the student representative on the panel, and it's a question about how Stellar might have contributed to help you develop some leadership skills. So obviously for Talia.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of alluded to it in the video. In high school, I wasn't involved. I didn't see myself as a leader. I have anxiety. I have imposter syndrome. It's very hard for me often to speak up, even when I need to speak up. And that's something that going through Stellar and going through HSI, particularly the integrative knowledge portfolio process, where it has a lot of reflective moments and exercises and things that you recognize characteristics in yourself that might not be what is the definition of a leader, whether that is using your voice when you have to, leading more from the grassroots where you're just interacting with people. I think that's one of the biggest things that it forced me to really self-reflect, which I didn't really like to do before. I was very much the type of person to be like, okay, it's just life and let's just ignore the parts and just kind of go through it. But it forced me to have those like necessary self-talks, talks with mentors, talks with peers, to recognize the intrinsic qualities I have that make me a leader in my own individual way. And I think that was the biggest thing, is everyone has leadership skills. Not everyone is in the front of the crowd with a bullhorn, but there's leaders that are in the crowd talking to other people, learning people's stories, and advocating for them. And so I think that was the biggest impact that it had for me in developing my leadership skills, is reflecting and growing in self-confidence and those sorts of things.
Excellent, thank you. And this is an interesting question that could be answered by multiple folks on the panel, but it's a question that asks, when getting students interested in Stellar, what are 2 or 3 of the talking points which might most attract them to participate? And so I know the things that we have seen that we believe impact students, but because we do have an ex-student on the panel, Talia, you're being a wonderful spokesperson. So what might be something that would be, a good talking point to attract students to participate in Stellar?
So it's actually something I did quite frequently as a student, even in my position as an admissions counselor and recruiter. As a student, I was a student ambassador, so I gave tours. And I mean, there's a very base, superficial attraction that like you get a cord when you graduate, right? And so it's like you get, all decked out, you look really cool. But that's like a very base. You should do it for more reasons than that, for sure. And I think the biggest thing is you have the opportunity to, I mean, it's kind of the theme, like grow in your character. And then you have something that's concrete, something that your experience that was abstract, you have a concrete proof of your transformation that you can give to graduate schools, that you can give to future employers and say, I have taken this meaningful time to reflect in myself, to grow in these 6 aspects or 3 aspects, whichever they are. So I can continue integrating all of these learned tools into my life moving forward. And I think that's probably the biggest reason you should do it, is because you really get so much out of it. If that's not for anything more than, a cord, you get lifelong experiences and lifelong tools and resources to be able to take that into the rest of your life.
Thank you, Talia. We're going to wind up with one final question, this one to Tamara, and it has to do with developing leadership skills. There's been a bit of conversation here about leadership as one of the things developed by STLR, although certainly there are many. But from an employer's perspective, how important is it when you are, for example, interviewing a potential new hire to be able to ascertain that they do possess some leadership skills and be able to verify that somehow?
As an employer, I think it's very important. And the STLR record, first of all, when I see several resumes that come across my desk all the time, but that if the STLR record is attached to resume electronically or paper format, that's going to be something that's going to stand out to me. And as an employer, I'm going to wonder, well, what is this? You know, what is this additional information that this student has provided? And looking at that record, I'm able to see if leadership is a competency that this position really needs. I'm able to see how that student attained that competencies, what they did in the classroom, what they did away from the classroom, and how they quote unquote transformed in that area. So as an employer, being able to identify a student with leadership skills, it's important to me because I can be able to ascertain if they're going to have the skills, the maturity level, the skill set that they need to come into the job, be able to manage themselves in the workplace maturely, and that they are going to fit in with not only our culture, but their team and the job and the role that we potentially select them for. So seeing that record, the skills that they have attained, and then also accompanying that with their interview, our interaction through that whole selection process. I think students that have that STLR record will have a leg up in that interview selection process.
Thank you very much, Tamara, for those insights. So what we're going to do at this point is I very much am eager to remind you about the fact that what you have seen actually in the STLR film itself, that being the product of student work, and a quick shout out certainly to Kyle Tango and to Breck McGow for the music and the scoring, Kyle for just a ton of videography, post-production work, and all the students that worked on that project. But I say that to remind you that having students work under the mentorship outside of class with faculty and or staff is one of the things that is a key developmental aspect. We call them student TL, transformative learning projects. And as we have had wonderful support from the United States Department of Education in the form of a grant, which provided us funding that allowed us to pay students $10 an hour to do those kinds of outside projects, that's very important. And we know of cases in which students being able to do that meant that they were not then having to take an off-campus job at a lower wage because they have to work in order to pay for school, to pay for families, and so on. And so I remind you about the message that you heard briefly from President Ravikumar Newhold Ravikumar, I'm sorry, at the end in the credits when she spoke about contributing to a crowdfunding campaign currently in process at give www.uco.edu/STLR, because until September 30th, the U.S. Department of Education will match all donations dollar for dollar. And what those donations go to is the Transformative Learning Endowment, and the proceeds from the endowment then are what we will use to continue paying students to work on these outside of class projects under the mentorship of faculty and staff. So with that quick reminder, it's a delight to say that we're going to move to our Stellar film premiere after party. At this point, we thank all of the attendees for joining us for the film premiere and the panel discussion proper afterwards. And if we can make the technology work at this point, for those of you who want to hang around, be able to talk with the stars. We've had some stars of the film on the panel today, and we have others that have joined us. We'll move to the after party now, which is just a very informal chance to hang out and chat among ourselves if you wish to do so. Thank you very much, everyone.